Can I just say, even when you've made the best decision for yourself, sometimes there is grief in letting go. Hello, I am so excited for today's episode. This is my first official episode of the Can I Just Say podcast, and I'm so excited for this one. This has been a topic that has been pretty prevalent at the front of my mind lately, so I figured it would be the best first episode to do. And it is about the grief that comes along with letting go of a situation, a person, a relationship, a job, something that we have invested a lot of our time and energy into. We hear it talked about a lot, about just letting things go if they no longer serve you, letting things go if it no longer feels good to you. You can do a search online to find all kinds of different journal prompts on how to let go, all kinds of different rituals and ceremonies that you can do on letting go. But my main focus today is I want to focus on the grief that comes along with letting go of who you had to become in that situation. Because that I don't feel is talked about enough. So whenever we are letting go of something we've invested a lot of our time and energy into, we tend to focus a lot on losing that specific thing. So it's losing that relationship or losing that job or losing that friend or losing that hope or dream that we once held. And we recognize that that grief often carries a lot of weight in the sacrifices that we've made, the memories that we've made that we're leaving behind, and the possibility of a future that we can never really fully get to know. But I don't think what we notice a lot is that we are also grieving the person we had to become to be in that situation and to be in that relationship. Because we are letting go a huge part of ourselves whenever we let go of that situation or that relationship or whatever it is that we've invested our time and energy into. It's a big piece of ourselves that we are letting go of as well. So every experience, every relationship, every chapter in our life that has shaped a version of ourselves, that version is tied to a choice that we've made, to a dream that we've pursued, or to an identity that we have created and carried through that situation. But whenever you move forward, you're not just saying goodbye to the external circumstances of that situation that you are letting go of. It's also the person you were in that situation. So it feels like losing an old friend sometimes. Because even though you know that person that you had to become or that version of yourself is no longer serving you, it's like losing a piece of yourself because you've lost that part of you that you don't know what fills that space yet. But this is where you get to build that compassion and you get to build that identity around who you truly are outside of that situation, because a lot of times in those kinds of situations that are no longer serving us anymore, we had to become somebody who we don't want to be. We had to become a people pleaser. We had to become somebody who had very lack boundaries. We had to become somebody who was not living up to what we deserve and what we are worthy of. So grieving that shift allows you to honor the growth that you are making, and it allows you to make room for the person who you are becoming, or the person who you are reclaiming, I like to say, because we're not really becoming anything different. We're just reclaiming who we were before that situation had to shape us into a version of ourselves that we don't recognize. So there are lessons in those past selves, and that is part of shadow work, which is something that I would love to do a topic on, an episode on someday, is shadow work. But it's not necessarily so much about letting go of that version of ourselves that we had to become. It's more about accepting and integrating that person within us, because we have to recognize that they were doing the absolute best that they could with the knowledge that they had. So, shifting that grief of lack, of loss, of being shameful or feeling like you weren't yourself, shifting that to love and acceptance begins to acknowledge the value that you're letting go and giving yourself permission to feel those feelings that come along with it. So instead of resisting the sadness, make sure that you are honoring it as a reflection of the depth of that journey. Gratitude is a huge, huge, huge successful tool in this process for me. I always, anytime I feel myself falling back into that lack mindset of, I've lost this thing, I can't believe I am so ashamed of who I had to be, I am so ashamed of what I had to become. Anytime I find myself in that kind of mindset again, I shift back to gratitude, because gratitude is so powerful. It allows you to reflect on how your past choices and versions of yourself contributed to your growth. So something that I like to do is I'll write a letter to my past self. I'll write a letter expressing my appreciation for how resilient she was, how supportive she was, how it was so brave for her to give up on her dreams, and it was so brave for her to just embrace the mistakes that she made and all of the lessons that she had to learn along the way. I write myself a letter to that past version of me, just thanking her, showing her gratitude, letting her know that she does not have to be ashamed. She does not have to be embarrassed. She did the absolute best that she could, and it is okay. I have got her now. So practicing self-compassion, it's a huge step along this journey. You have to remind yourself that grieving the past doesn't mean that you're ungrateful for your present. It's a natural process of the evolution of who you are. I find that building rituals for myself, such as doing like a moon bath on the full moon, or creating moon water or lighting a candle. So in my shamanic practices, we do fire ceremonies on the full moons. That's very cathartic for me, for releasing a lot of the old shame that I hold and the embarrassment and all of those old versions of myself that I'm letting go of, but also integrating and embracing at the same time. I know it sounds contradictory. I know it does. But it's letting go in a way of just letting those versions of yourself just not have to feel that weight of the emotions. It's allowing this current version of yourself to be the one who's in the lead. So the fire ceremonies are something that I like to do. Journaling is great. Sometimes whenever I get really stuck in those phases where I feel very ashamed or embarrassed, I'll give the victim full voice. I will just open up my notebook. It's like allowing my inner teenager to just rage out and have all of the platform that she needs to just get all of her anger out. And I will just allow that victim to have her voice. I will write about how awful I feel, how embarrassed it feels, how terrible this makes me feel. I'll just let her have the voice, because once I get that energy flowing, then I'm able to open myself back up for that acceptance and that compassion. Meditating is very good for that too. I will sometimes do guided meditations, but then I will also sometimes turn all of that anger and frustration into art. So I'll do things like I'll dance or I'll paint, and I am not a painter and I am not an artist at all, but I do enjoy putting those feelings into my artwork, because that is where creativity comes from. So I like to focus on the opportunity of renewal here, because it is like a kind of death and rebirth, like a shedding of the old identity, changing your perspective and seeing it as not so much as a loss, but making space for something new. Because had we not let go of that thing that was very much center of our focus and very much something that we were creating a lot of identity around, if we had not let go of that thing, then we would not have the space for new things to come in and things that are going to be much more lasting. So when you view grief as a testament of love and effort instead that you've invested your life into, it transforms into a bridge of acceptance. So this mindset allows you to carry the lessons and love from your past while fully embracing the infinite potential of who you can become. So it's allowing yourself to learn from the lessons and the mistakes that you made and recognize that you are a human being. You are going to make mistakes and there are going to be lessons along this experience. But recognizing that there is so much potential in all of these mistakes that you've made. And there is her name is Crystal the Oracle. I'll make sure that I have her linked in the description of this episode. But she says, make a choice, have an experience, and make a decision. She goes into explaining so eloquently what she means by that, but I will share from my own experience and my understanding of what that means. So we are typically faced with a choice of, do I choose A or do I choose B? A lot of times we will talk ourselves out of one of those choices or making a choice at all because we will rob ourselves of the experience. We will say, well, if I do A, X, Y, Z will happen. Or if I do B, A, B, C will happen. And we already rob ourselves of the experience because we're already assuming what's going to happen. So instead of trying to force yourself to make the best or the correct decision, and this is where I'm connecting this and letting go, because it's not always about making the quote unquote right decision, because there are no right decisions. Make a choice. Just choose one of them. Listen to whatever your heart is telling you. Make that choice. Allow yourself to have the experience that you are meant to have by making that choice. It might be a very shitty choice that you've made, but that's part of the human process. That's part of how we learn. We have to allow ourselves to make mistakes, and I can tell you that I am trying to embrace that fully. I'm trying to allow myself to make mistakes. I'm doing that here on this episode of this podcast. I am trying to not edit. I have made a few edits. I will be honest and clear, and I will be very vulnerable and authentic. I have made a couple of edits. I have had to cut a few things out where I've kind of lost track of what I was saying. But I am trying to keep the editing at a minimal because I am trying to be as authentic as possible for all of you. So I made the choice today to start my podcast. I very much tried to talk myself out of it. Who am I? Imposter syndrome came in. Who am I to try and do this? What credibility do I have that people are going to listen to me? I already tried to talk myself out of the choice. I already tried to talk myself out of having this full experience. But I had to let go of that old part of me that was so worried about perfection, that was so worried about sounding silly, that was so worried about being embarrassed, that was so worried about telling my story from my side of things. And now that I've been able to sit here and actually sit down and record this audio for you, I've made the decision that this is fun. This is for me. I have so much that I want to talk about. And even if one person listens to this, how awesome is that? You know what I mean? But I've seen something before that said, like whenever you see on social media people getting like tens of thousands of likes or views, things like that, and sometimes for yourself you'll get 10 views. But imagine yourself in a room with 10 people who listened to what you had to say. That's pretty big. That's pretty big, and that to me is a huge portion of success. That to me feels very successful, and I'm just happy to be here and enjoying this experience. I hope that you found any of this helpful. I hope it resonated. Make sure that you let me know if there's anything that you would like to hear about. You can find me on social media. I'll make sure that I link my Facebook and my Instagram. But let me know what you think. I love all of you, and I hope that I will see you again soon.